How much money do I need to retire on? It's a really common question. And Simon, how much capital do I really need to retire on?
Sure, Judy. Yeah, look, we tend to use a rule of thumb to work out how much capital is needed. It's really simple. If you think about someone having $1 million, we would expect they could generate 50,000 of income from that $1 million.
So how does that translate to someone's retirement needs?
So it varies for each individual as to how much income they need. But let's say they need $100,000 in retirement, then that would mean that they need $2 million of capital to generate that $100,000 per annum. Now, that $2 million is going to generate that income, including CPI. So that capital is going to continue to grow by the rate of inflation each year.
Is that an exact figure?
No, it's not exact. Everyone's different. So it's just guidance. It's something we use when we're doing projections for our clients. It just sort of assists in terms of setting a general target in terms of how much they'll need.
Sure. And many people worry about spending too much in retirement. How could they better balance that with their needs?
We encourage people to enjoy their retirement. It's really important that that they do the things they want to do, spend time with children, grandchildren, travel, that sort of thing. So we encourage them to spend money where they can and enjoy their retirement at an early age, but also take into account the fact that they're going to need to have capital in reserve for later in life when there might be more money that needs to be spent on things like health or aged care, that sort of thing. So it's just about getting that balance right.
But at the same time, they still need their capital to last.
That's right. So it's about ensuring that we set some objectives, understand approximately how much capital they're going to need to last for the remainder of their lives, and for them to achieve what's important to them. So we can use sort of modelling and that sort of thing to determine what's the right balance between how much you're going to spend now and how much you need to keep in reserve for later in life.
Mm-hmm. And many people want to help their children and grandchildren. How does that fit into retirement planning?
Yeah, so that's really important consideration. And so, look, it's really about understanding what their needs are and setting aside enough capital for their own needs. And then they can start thinking about how much capital to set aside for helping out children and grandchildren, or helping out other organisations that they may want to provide assistance to.
And typically, where does retirement income come from?
So the retirement income comes from two main areas in terms of structures. So we've got superannuation, which is a very tax efficient structure, and then we've got various other structures that sit outside superannuation. So we'll just call that non-superannuation capital.
So what role does super play compared to investments outside of super?
Super is just very tax efficient. So we will tend to encourage clients to move as much money into super as possible as they're reaching retirement, or even after they've reached retirement. So those years from pretty much 50 onwards, right through to 65, 70, we're continuing to see if we can get money into super. And the reason for that is because when you take pension income, it is usually tax-free. So from age 60, you can start to access a pension. And in most situations, it will be totally tax-free. So that's the most efficient way for you to receive your income.
Mm-hmm. So do investments outside of super still play a role?
Absolutely, particularly investments in your own name. Again, some of that income can be tax-free on lower tax thresholds. So having money in your own name can be important in order from a tax perspective, but also just that you've got that additional liquidity and access to funds when you want them. So we encourage clients to have, I suppose, a balance, either a cash balance or even some other investments in their own personal names. Mm-hmm. The other thing too is there are limits on how much you can have in super. So once you've got as much into super as possible, then you may need to access those other structures in order to invest.
How should investments be structured once someone enters retirement?
It's about ensuring that there's enough liquidity and also income for the client to access. And we tend to focus on 3 different areas when determining what that asset allocation looks like. So we look at their needs in the short to medium term, so liquidity. We look at their needs for the medium to longer term, which is longevity. And then we also look at what we were talking about before, funds that they may want to leave for future generations, which is legacy. So in determining how we structure the investments, we look at each of those 3 pots and then invest accordingly. So the short to medium term needs to be more liquid, income generating, investments like cash and fixed income, while the other 2 pots, you have exposure to more growth assets. You're trying to grow those assets for those future generations or for later in life when you're going to have your healthcare needs and aged care needs and that sort of thing.
A concept we often talk about is a bucket strategy. What is that?
That is literally what sort of we were just alluding to. So for each of those 3 areas, liquidity, longevity, and legacy, you've effectively got 3 separate buckets. And so you might allocate different lumps of capital to each of those buckets. You know that over the next 2 years, you're going to need to access this amount of funds. It might be for everyday living, but it could also be things like travel. It could be for assisting family. Whatever it is, we're going to make sure that those funds are available, very liquid, and not at risk in terms of market movements and that sort of thing. And then the second bucket looks at longevity, which is more growth assets, and the third bucket, which is obviously looking at legacy and investing for those future generations.
And why is that strategy important in retirement?
It's important in retirement because you don't have the ability to go back and rebuild that capital. So it's very important that where capital needs to be protected, that's what we do. If you have a strategy where you are just putting it all in that third bucket and allocating to growth, you could be in a situation where you're not able to access that capital because it's illiquid, or it may not be an opportune time to access it because markets have fallen or something has happened. So it's really important to ensure you have that strategy in place so that the funds that you need in the short term are protected and accessible, and not at risk, because you can't get that money back if you lose it.
Mm-hmm. And when we put this all together, what does a good retirement income plan look like?
So a good income retirement plan, in the first instance, is about understanding what your goals and objectives are. How much income do you need, and when do you need it? Then it's about determining how much capital you're going to need to be able to achieve those goals and objectives, to be able to generate that income and ensure that liquidity is available. And then it's about how do we structure the investments and what do you invest in.
And ultimately, what's the goal of that planning?
So the goal of the planning is for people to live the lifestyle and the life they want to live. So to be able to enjoy their retirement, do the travel, spend more time with their children, assist their children, pay for grandchildren's school fees, do all of those things to be able to achieve all those goals that they want to achieve. And it's really important because you've spent your whole life working and building towards this, and now there's an opportunity for you to go out and maybe do and achieve some of the things that you haven't had time to do in the past.
Thanks, Simon. I found that really informative, and I hope you did too.